So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Michelle Bennis. I'm one of the co-champions of this group. My partner Lisa is stuck in on Saturday and wasn't able to make it, which is unfortunate because she's the one that completely organized this month's talk. So I just kind of showed up. So Roman's here from Magnet Forensics to talk about prototyping practices, and I understand he has a history or a lot of experience with data sciences. So that was a terrible introduction. My apologies. We are recording, and this will be on YouTube. If anyone has any concerns about potentially being on YouTube, please speak now. And the other thing is we have our session here for a few reasons. We wanted to do it in a restaurant where people would have the opportunity to order drinks and food and interact a little bit more than in a boardroom setting. And this is the only place that allows us to do that without paying a fee for the room. So we don't have any budget with this group, so I do encourage you to at least order a drink just to support this establishment.
Or offer sponsorship.
Yeah. We're gonna about that. So okay, so without further ado.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, everyone, for letting me speak to you, and thank you for the organizers. This is a really neat event. Now that I know about it, I'll definitely join your group because it sounds really cool. I had already had a really interesting discussion, really cool discussion. So I hope for this to be not just a presentation. I would love for this to be a discussion. I have, I don't know, like 13 slides. They're based around questions. So if some question doesn't feel like it's applicable, doesn't make sense, you can feel free to interrupt and ask questions. I would love for this to be interactive. And why aren't you going to this? So I didn't rehearse this, so I apologize for any mistakes. A little bit about myself. I'm originally a software engineer from the University of Toronto. I did my master's in electrical, and then I did my PhD in video compression. So I a bit of a mix of backgrounds. About when I joined this startup called Avasi in 2008, I started as a software developer, but because it was a small team, I had to put on a lot of hats. I'm sure it sounds familiar to a lot of people. I started doing a lot of model work. I really didn't enjoy the software engineering as much as I thought I would. So the solving difficult problems and challenges is something that I really liked and got into. And after a while, I would lead a team to develop some models. Then I actually had started getting direct reports, getting involved in running subjective studies and doing more model development. Where I'm at currently is at Magnet Forensics. I'm a data scientist there, but I'm also a leader. I have, all kinds of wonderful opportunities to collaborate and make neat, shiny things. So the problems that I alluded to earlier are around these questions. So, if anything resonates really well with you, please. Hopefully we'll get to all of them, but we can totally stop on some of them for longer. Let's see if I actually will have my notes in this view. Oh, it does not show my notes. Well, that's okay. So the first question, I guess, is how does research and prototyping fit into organizations? What's an ideal? I don't know if there's such a thing as an ideal. Every company does their own thing. There are some the data science. What I found in some of my research is that it's really misunderstood. It's it's seen as a savior in one sense. It's completely like this team that does some neat things on the side, but it's not really core business. And there are companies that have really embraced data and data science to be used in everything, from driving product to even human resources planning and things like that. There's one thing though around the teams. The research teams typically attract a slightly different group of people. They typically have masters or PhD. They really like challenging problems. They're sometimes creative problem solvers. So they may not be as, for example, like a software developer. They may not have a software developer mindset. But they are really good at discerning patterns in data. I propose that these teams need a slightly different approach than running a software development team because of the unique nature of some of these team members, that they do, they might get bored really easily by the unit test. They might need that challenge. They go for that challenge. Their personality types might want to be, see the read raw data. Don't tell me what the problem is. I'll try to understand what the problem is. Approach. And I feel like there's a good win when you can have an engagement with these teams across the organization. So it's not just product talks to the research team, or the research team is something that engineering just talks to. I feel like having a collaboration across teams in all organizations is always a good thing. But I think it's really important for a data science team or prototyping team. If the team is treated as something that is core to the business, it can really, really benefit and transform a company. There's some examples in town that actually do that. So there's two different roles: product and project management. And I was asked by Lisa about this a little bit. How do you include project management? Because while you might have, if on an established software development team, you might have a well-defined problem. For a research team, the problem may not be as well defined, and you may not be able to plan an execution for a research team as well as you would for a product team, because there's a lot of risky and unknown things. So while we all, I think, can agree that strong product management is a key to company success, a weak PM engagement in a research team might lead to lack of customer insight. So I see the product management really being the representing the customer in a lot of the decisions, bringing the customer back, and fitting the ideas and those pretty shiny things that the data team can do into some sort of product roadmap where they would fit in. The one concern is that if you have a product management team really drive the research, it might stifle some creativity, and you might end up with a research team that is really just another product team that's doing just product work, which may be what the business needs at the time. However, it may not be sustainable for long-term success because you might miss out on some people that want to work on those unsolved problems that you might find useful 2 years from now, not something that you need to meet business need right now. So I really like this collaborative approach between product management and the research team, where initially there's a fairly loose definition of the problem, the research team is allowed to explore the problem creatively and checking in with the with the product. As time moves on and the problem is more well understood, that's when the product management can really try to align with business and start planning and executing to get it into product. So I feel like there's a it could be a happy in between where there's a collaboration between the two teams. Any questions before maybe I'm talking really fast?
Do you have any examples at forensics?
Magnet forensics? Yes. So yes, we in 2016. There was an idea that we want to bring in AI into our product. I don't know if you're familiar with what the product is. And the research team fairly independently did a prototype and proof of concept, de-risked some of the really key elements that we weren't certain of. That really took, about 4 weeks. And we had something working integrated. We could show to customers that the idea worked. However, it was duct taped together, and it wasn't a very reliable solution. So then then we went into a productization phase for about 4 months, maybe a little extra than the 4 months. And we launched in Q1 of last year as a product. And during that productization phase, the research team actually, this will steal some thunder from some of the other slides. What we did was we created a larger team. So the research team became like a semi-product team with 4 other people joining us from product that were envisioned to take over the work once it was productized at the end of the research, at the end of that phase. So, and that was, during this phase, the project management gradually became more and more involved and was able to understand and learn about the new technology and what are some of the pros and cons of the different alternatives. And at the end, they were able to really, figure out what the roadmap would be for, for the next year. So, yes.
How and who is involved where you are to make the decision, okay, we've done enough research, now we need to start to productize something?
That's a very good question. So it can definitely be the product and the lead on the research team together, because I think you need a bit of a balance. It all depends on the personalities but the research side might want to answer more questions or make the shinier, prettier, more fancy thing, whereas the product will bring the balance of, yeah, but this we need to do this for customers. So I think it's a bit of both, as in the key is really to at the onset to try and identify why are we doing prototyping? Okay, is it just to show something works, or is it really to de-risk the really important things, right? And once you identify those things, and you can hopefully solve them relatively quickly, at that point you're really into the productization phase of that concept.
I had a question about the de-risking part of this. So I find that when new ideas are presented, really the engineering team is the one who understands the risk profile. So the product team will always want to productize because it's going to be new and shiny and cool. What is the discipline that you found of where you've de-risked enough that you're willing to show, or do you show things early and educate the product manager on what risks are involved? Where's the balance that you drive?
That comes a little bit from experience. You need to be able to, based on past history, I know that I can develop X block, a block of X of thing, where we've never done this thing and we don't know how it will work. So you can actually write down all what the concerns are, and you can do it even as a team. I feel like you could say, some person will know, I know this will work as well, but we really don't understand A or B or X, and what are the bigger issues, and work that way, I would say. But it typically is, I haven't had an issue where it was really difficult to spot the risky things. Like when you had this idea and it's like, yeah, this function is not well understood and there's really big problem there. So let's investigate that before we invest any more time into it. So. That answer?
Sorry to interrupt, guys. We just have the food coming up, so I'm just going to yell it out. I have a regular poutine. Thank you. I have the pippin bread. Okay. And then, oh, you're welcome. And the anti-Heatos. Perfect. And there's more food just coming this way. Oh, enjoy.
So before I go on, I want to make sure that this doesn't come on as like the discussion on the project manager, that you want to pigeonhole and say that project manager can't have input or doesn't know anything at the big, like that's not pigeonholing, right? Like it just there's especially when you're starting a new prototype where there's a lot of risk and a lot of unknowns, it's really difficult to plan and understand what the technology will look like. You don't have an established track record of features or that you can continue adding. So that's why initially the research team can try to plan that better sometimes, obviously with the project manager, because you want to also make sure that you're doing this because of a customer need. That's where the biggest value comes there. But doesn't mean that, you know, they can't be a big asset. Okay, so
That's a good point. So have you run into an experience where you have a customer need, but not even your customers realize they need it yet?
yes.
Example?
The previous company, we came up with something that we were trying. We had came up with this really neat technology and this really cool solution, which I thought was the customer need, and did the customer want to pay for it, right? And what is the cycle and all that kind of stuff. So I really strongly believe that this stuff has to be tested, especially these ideas need to be tested against customer as soon as possible, because it's not enough for it to be nice and neat. It has to be, somebody needs to be able to put down some money on it and say, I want it. So going to the next slide was like, how do you include the customer? So engineering teams often don't get the benefit of being in a room with customers. We lock our engineers away sometimes, and for some good reasons and bad reasons.
Sorry to interrupt, guys. Bacon cheddar burger with Caesar salad. Feta vegetable flatbread.
So I'm an engineer, so I feel like I can say that. And I think it could totally make sense if you have an established product, but I feel like it's a bit of a missed opportunity for a research team. You got to imagine that these researchers, some that have come from academia, they have they like to understand the data and the problem. They're often not happy with just somebody conveying what the problem is to them. They really want access to the real information, to the real data. Often they can sometimes bring in insights that you might not be able to catch otherwise. Sometimes you do get a bit of like an overlap, because the product guy would say, well, I could have told you that and summarized it. But I feel like there's a lot of positive when you can actually have that engagement. Yes?
Have you ever had any issues with the customer not wanting to talk to a lot of people? Because that, in my experience, is typically they're very focused on what they perceive their problem is. They don't necessarily want to talk to your entire engineer.
That's right. So very good point. So you really have to, in the settings from experience, you don't want to bring in your whole research team. You don't want to bring in your whole engineering. But just like you would have maybe like a representative from product, maybe a representative from marketing, consider having a representative from a data team that might actually be able to see this as well. So that's how I would see it interact, right? It also, like you said, I think you're alluding to my last point, you need to do it with a bit of care. Some of the data scientists may not have had training on how to interact with customers. They might, I've done this myself, they may be tempted to lead the customer to their preferred idea or the shiny thing. So you really need that a bit of coaching and training to make sure that it is you are trying to understand and learn about the problem and about the customer, not trying to persuade them to buy your shiny thing.
So,
Yes?
So, the role of the business analyst. The business analyst is the business analyst also part of the research team? Because I think the business analyst has the the coaching to know how to balance, between the customer, the executive, and the engineering team?
So I can't answer that question for your organization. The business analyst might be the right person to fit that role. At Magnet, for instance, we have very good designers and very experienced designers that have done a lot of customer interviews. So they would slap my hand and be like, "Why are you? Don't be quiet, don't talk." So whoever can do that coaching appropriately, and obviously if you can bring in, to that interview with different perspectives, maybe there's a business person as well involved in the discussion, and maybe there's a strategy person that works about, I don't know, whatever the problem is. For sure, this is a little biased towards my data science field. Okay. So I think this is fairly obvious. I don't know if I want to spend too much time on it, but so how do you define problems, right? I think I've already alluded to this a little bit. If you're a button factory and you're making a bunch of buttons, and you have a research team, and their mandate is to innovate buttons, they'll make prettier buttons. But if you don't allow the team to be creative and look outside of that problem space and give them that visibility to the actual, what is the raw problem the customer is having, you might fail because you might not think of the Velcro solution. And obviously, while this is slanted toward data science, and I am very, aware that for business reasons, you can't have half of your organization doing prototyping and research work. So obviously, this has to be, balanced, whatever that balance, the ratio is, that the executive team's decision. But I feel like it's really good to leave some room for some of this creative work. So I keep my job. So again, on the definition, so instead of, here's the problem, this is what I need to solve, the engagement, if it's more collaborative again, where you allow the engineers to help you define the problem with you, you'll have a much more happy team and hopefully a better outcome. I think that's general of everything. At one point, somebody asked, well, can't you not do this on a product team? Of course. You don't have to define, have a separate, isolated research team that you just have these, I don't know, people, strange, goofy things, people there. But, this can totally be done on a product team. In fact, a lot of the times I found that the question wasn't really, do we want to research a problem? It was, I just want to prototype something really good. Show me, pick 2 open source libraries, tell me which one is better. That can, that scope can totally be within the realm of a product team. You want to basically use the resources you have as well as you can. So for the open-ended problems that you might require literature reviews, reading some scientific journal papers, and analyzing data, that's when you want to probably bring in your research data scientist. So project management, I think there may be at least one project manager here. I feel like, again, this is not to pigeonhole anyone. Please, I apologize. I just wanted to see how, from my perspective, how I feel project management can really help a research team. So while the product manager is the voice of the customer, the project manager is about getting things done. And how do you get things done in an environment where you want to be creative, but you also have tight deadlines? There's some business need that need to satisfy. So you also have these sometimes creative academic spirits that they can definitely use some traditional product management to keep them on track. And some things that I found that work really well is to, identify these key risky things, identify what these problems are, time box the research. So you can say, I will spend a week on doing literature surveys, and at the end of the week, we will review as a team and we'll decide whether or not we should invest more time or we have identified a potential algorithm or things. So time boxing has worked wonders. And then as you do that more often, you get better at time boxing. Prioritizing research spikes. So we use Agile, and we have stories, and we often have research spikes. So oftentimes we try to do those research spikes at the beginning, first things, because oftentimes they are the ones that will unlock a big decision. And the outcome of these is typically a whole bunch of other stories, or we just close that path altogether. It's a dead end. And so, we do these research spikes, we review results, we bring in the project manager and the product manager often to review where we go next. The project manager helps with a lot of the planning and keeping on track, letting us know, maybe when we're stuck in the rabbit hole. And the product helps prioritize those items in the backlog.
Did you have any inspiration? I've seen some documentaries, I don't recall the name, how they build a nuclear bomb. So there were some researchers and some military guy came in and they applied the boot camp approach. Yeah, it was a research and product making project. Yeah, so I mean, do you think that like a boot camp approach works in the research environment?
I would have to learn more about it. Maybe. I don't know enough about the bootcamp approach to give you an answer. Right? So maybe we can talk after. So how do you engage the whole engineering? So let's say you decide, I have this research team and so that I can. Oftentimes, there could be some friction between that team and the rest of engineering because they, maybe they work on the shiny thing all the time, or maybe, but their stuff doesn't get integrated into product, or maybe never makes it into product. So, how do you help with this? Because maybe there's a better in between. So something that I've been trying, we tried on one of the projects, and this is where I was alluding earlier that this is stealing a bit of thunder, is having a more collaborative approach where initially in the prototyping, maybe it's the research prototype team, but then you bring in people from engineering, 1 or 2 resources or 4, whatever, depending on how big the problem is, and they work together to bring that idea into product. So for data scientists like myself, it's really good to learn about, what does product mean? So asking the questions, you're exploring a new dimension of yourself where you want to make sure that it's reliable, how to code well, how will it scale? Questions like that. Whereas and then you understand the customer a little bit better, and this is where a lot of the engineers that have a lot of experience on the product team can bring in that experience. For the engineer, this is also a growth opportunity because they can learn about new technologies. Or maybe they'll learn about Python or sklearn and what shuffle split is. They'll learn about these ideas. They'll learn about maybe some graphs and how to include graphs in their product, and they'll make hopefully a better solution together. So how to hire, keep, and grow people. So I feel like there's the team structure is very important. Diversity of experience is very important. I feel like on these research teams, you really need strong collaborators. You want a mix of people that have the ability to think of the big picture, think about the customer, and you also need the people that are focused on the small little pieces and how will you do it from bottom up. I really like this Scout team mission statement, and I like it because I like to drive and work with my team this way. It's to everybody is productive most of the time. Everybody can do and review others' work, so it's very egalitarian. Everyone has everyone's back. There's no individuals, but individual strengths. Clear objectives and tight timelines. Strong leadership based on trust and character. And creativity is and collaboration is the overall team strengths. But my personal one is like get shit done. You have to get stuff done. You can't spend on research and reading papers for months because it all depends. Maybe some organizations can afford that. I've never been at one that they can do that. So a good fit for that team is important, and buying into these ideas is essential. When you're running a team with 5 people and you have tight deadlines, and everybody has here's a critical component, you need to make sure that everybody's contributing. Also, you also make personally, I want to make sure that you're not sprinting all the time, that you are doing this at a sustainable rate. And one thing that you have to be mindful, though, is you can be a victim of your own success. Sometimes when you create this team and then you bring in product people and you launch this product, and really, with all the features on time, there's a big temptation to make that your product, the next product team for that product, supporting that product. That can work, but that can lead to, the creative people may not get the work on the new and novel things that they would like to work on. You might be sacrificing some of your long-term vision and some of the things that you might not know even 2 years from now for sustaining a product that makes golden eggs right now. Okay.
When you say that the done thing, yeah, then you have to use some methods, yeah, to enforce a discipline or something, yeah.
Yeah. So this is where the project manager can really help, and the leader of the team can really help. Creating milestones, focusing, maintaining team focus, really understanding what is the thing that we want to solve, what is the risky thing, and even if sometimes you're working on the non-critical things, at least be honest with the team. Like this is you're doing this for supporting X, Y, Z.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking is I'm following Elon Musk, yeah, and recently people are blaming him that he's too tough with his team because they do research and production, yeah. So because he has high standards, yeah, the team believes that he's pushing them too hard, yeah. So I mean, where is the balance here? I mean,
so I feel like the team leads set an example. So you just need to make sure that whoever your team lead is, that they do maintain that sustainable rate, that people are happy and enjoy that collaborative environment, right? It's not, you definitely, no team, I don't think, want to burn them out, right?
Excuse me.
Yes.
When you say scout team, is the implication that it's a temporary team that is just focused on this, kind of this problem, and then once that problem is solved, it's broken up to work on, say, other scout teams or other projects?
So I mean it from more of a military sense, as in, like you might have your R&D org is the army, but you have that hill that you need to find out what's on the other side.
Reconnaissance.
That's like a reconnaissance team. So from that perspective, you want to have a team that is really tight, that can really perform and get move on these research and these really challenging problems and execute of them relatively well, so that you can find out what's on that other side of the hill quickly.
So with that, at least typically, that kind of team will have been together for a long time. They'll know each other very well. That's how they get that that performance. Is that the implication here, that scout team is a team that worked together before, that you're kind of, you've got this team that's a well-oiled machine, and you're throwing them at kind of particular problems?
So you can definitely have a core, like 2 or 3 people that are part of that team. But I've had a lot of success with co-ops on the team. So it doesn't have to be like super senior people on this team. You can have a mix. That's why diversity. I actually like the diversity. You know, if the productive is key for me here at the top, right? Like it's, you know, you want to make sure, because on a small team you really can't, like if somebody's not productive, you can see it immediately. And if you're pulling on tight deadlines and there's a lot of unknown and risk and uncertainty, you really want to make sure that you have that really good team vibe, and you know, where everybody trusts each other and they can get stuff done. Right?
So I'm curious about risk conversations, because by definition you're doing something that hasn't been done before, typically, I would imagine.
Yes.
How do those crop up? How do you deal with the skeptics in the crowd who are like, yes, Roman, we know you know your numbers, but this sounds like a crazy idea.
So I feel like the team needs to be, you know, you want to be able to have a team where they can go across the hill and says, no, that doesn't work, right? And the team needs to be robust enough that they can pivot and go, okay, there's another hill, go over there, right? So that they don't like, oh, I just invested 4 months on this thing and I want to be like, they need to be resilient enough that they can say, hey, I've seen it, enough, can't do anything, go over there, and we'll need to go over there, right? So, does that answer your question? I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, I think so. Because if you have a team for whom success is adoption of a particular idea, then the risk conversation is different. The team feels safe. I've gone down this path, I've investigated that there's nothing there for us, and the organization is okay with that, and that's a healthy risk.
That's right. I feel that you need to set up the team for success by allowing it to fail sometimes.
I would argue that it's not failure if you've been clear with them that their deliverable is knowledge, regardless, knowledge and learning to pass on to other teams.
Yes, I like that view much better.
Yeah, you say, we've learned that this is not a good idea. Congratulations, you have succeeded at knowing that this is not a good idea.
That's right.
So my friend Argita Karai says, we have releases to learn and we have releases to earn.
Even better. So somebody asked me before this, should a research team take ideas from concept and all the way to the product? Maybe. Depends on the team and the execution of the team, I feel. I feel like what I've been able to create at Magnet has allowed that, where it's a bit of a hybrid. You know, you had a designer, product, project, engineering, and research. You know, working collaboratively, each providing, you know, a certain, you know, key element. Not always all 100% time. Maybe initially the product was less involved and the researcher was more involved. But by the end of it, you had more of the product and engineering involved in delivering the idea and the concept. So yeah, I think it's, I think has worked really well, because I've had failures where, you know, the research team developed something without the input of the product, even though it was a really cool and shiny thing. The product really didn't buy into it. It didn't buy into the idea, and the idea sat on a shelf for a year. So, and then when it was just like thrown over the wall to the engineering team, and the engineering team sometimes ended up reinventing some of the stuff. It was like, why would you? Because again, they didn't have the buy-in, they weren't involved in the decisions initially. They thought, you know, they misunderstood some of the requirements and some of the customer interviews that were done by the research team, right? So having the more as much collaboration earlier on is very helpful, and making sure that you do get that buy-in and understanding of the features from the product, from engineering, from the designer, And obviously, even better, and I've had this happen, they can provide some really powerful insight into customer, into your product, and how it might function, what the what the roadmap is, where it can fit. But just something like I wrote down like 4 things to keep in mind. So make sure if you have a research team, make sure that they have the customer need in mind. The solution that they develop can function as a product. So another risky thing is that if you just have a research team, the thing that they might develop may not actually be something that is a reliable product. And it may not be maintainable. And one thing that I haven't thought initially when I had this was who will take over once the research team is done? Who will maintain it? Who will improve, innovate on that thing? So the other question I got was, how do you foster creativity in a structured environment? So you have tight deadlines, there's certain business need. Can you have creativity? I'm like, of course, like why won't you? To me, that's no-brainer. So again, this goes back to the don't criticize failure and criticize the learnings. I'm going to just read off because there's a lot. Encourage constructive and frequent peer reviews. Encourage side projects for unsolved problems. So a lot of times there might be some ideas in different departments of problems, and that if you allow the team to work on, might help them fulfill that creative need, or maybe bring joint ideas from different disciplines. Research spikes are wonderful. Time boxing them and other research activities. And I think that here it's really important to make sure that you're transparent about the business need, because I think we all want to do good. We all have good intentions. However, sometimes that doesn't get communicated. Why can't I spend another week on this? It's like, well, if you're transparent about the business need, that can go a long way, not to feel like it's your stifling creativity. Make unrelated work and explorations a core priority for the team. Obviously with balance, so you don't want this to be completely unchecked. Creating a mission statement for the team is really, really powerful. I started doing that and thinking about it, and I think it allows you to focus and brings in some help with it when you prioritize. And then the last 4 is basically, allow time for customer, allow time for upgrading skills, undirected work, and unsolved problems. So how are some of the practical ways how you would do that? Lunch and learns. So we have, I have one of my co-workers, he organizes machine learning lunch and learns, so once every month, I think. So supporting that, bringing and allowing for time to prep for that. I know people are participating in hackathons. That's a really good idea. A lot of good creative things happen there. But also there are some, engaging other teams, looking for some of these, allowing the team to look for some of these problems, having more open-ended problems, and allowing input into like defining the problem is, I think, where a lot of it comes from. And I think that was my last slide. Comments? Any more questions?
How we get the inspiration from big guys like Google and machine learning stuff?
Well, you definitely can take inspiration. It's really, really difficult to compete with them, and I wouldn't try on a small team. But there's so many learnings. I really like the Google model. They open source a lot of the software. They publish a lot of papers. So you can leverage a lot of that really quickly without much effort. So I would not try to compete. I would try to learn from what they can provide. Any other questions? Yes?
respect to, excuse me, those last 4 points, allowing
Yes.
for some time. We've, where I work, we've looked at a couple ways, and right now we're going towards scaled agile, and scaled agile has this innovation and planning iteration.
Sure.
After 4 or 5. Have you seen any other approaches to ingraining this allow for time approach within an agile context?
So, a very good question. So, maybe the customer one is really easy to answer, because that one, if you're working on a prototype, you can set us some milestones. Oh, I'm going to have this customer interview, and then who's going to be at this customer interview? And this is the feature set for that customer interview that we're going to try to prepare. So and then you can try to decide who goes to that customer interview. Maybe the whole team, maybe only can have one person. Maybe you can only record the interview, or I don't know. It depends on the context. The upgrading the skills is part of like the personal development that you can help and work with the personal one-on-ones. So just make sure there's room for that. Some people don't need to do that, so you don't need to. I wouldn't. It's not a mandate, right? For undirected work, I think that can just be done by saying, hey, if somebody's interested, how much time would you like to set aside? A week or a month? A day? Is it a day, a month? That sounds reasonable to me. That's your playtime to do research on unrelated problems, right? So that's something that I would recommend you could do. Is that?
Yeah.
I can expand that. So I find that it's really hard to make time for that kind of stuff because you have so many other priorities. I worked at a company once where we did called them FedEx days, with the idea that you deliver something within 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And so the entire engineering team participated. First thing, like 10 o'clock in the morning, one day we would have a meeting where everyone would brainstorm ideas of like things they wanted to do. It might be upgrading their skills, it might be like a prototype of something or writing a script to do something or whatever. And then people would decide if they wanted to do things individually or break off in small teams and do it. And then 24 hours later, we would have a demo. And then like the company would buy pizza, people wanted to stay late, that kind of stuff. And it was just like, you're not allowed to work on other things during this period. And we tried to do it quarterly. It was pretty cool. There were some really cool things that were created during that time. If you wanna, that's an idea if you're trying to figure out how to make time for that kind of stuff.
So we did exactly the same. When I say hackathons, that's exactly what we had.
Yeah.
It was basically 24 hours, started on Thursday morning. The HR team did an amazing job of like, making sure there's some food and snacks, and there were different activities throughout the day, it's a lot of fun. It's a really great team building, but it also allows you to have that creative outlet, and that's great across the org, not just for research teams, right? Like I find a lot of the engineers are generally very creative people to start with, so they really, really enjoy that.
So I could see how some of these ideas could definitely be used for incremented chunks. But it means if you avoid that consensus view, you come up with something that's sort of different than what you could ask the group members to come up with as an answer, and they would vote for it. That's not what you're going to come up with if you want something that's fundamentally something totally different. So where does this stuff let you down, or where does it sort of stop working?
So it's always a spectrum. Problems are a spectrum. Like you have the technology decision maybe on one state where you want to prototype solution A versus solution B, all the way to like I want to build the next AI that can be sentient or something. Right? They can have a spectrum of different problems. So what I have found, I actually haven't found this approach we exhausted its limits because for a lot of the problems that I have found, the simpler solutions that yielded most of the gain were typically really good, like good enough. It doesn't mean that after the week of research, you stop and there's no more research. Like for that problem, you make decision. The decision could be we need to spend a month of digging into this, and that could be totally legitimate answer. But as long as you time box it, the challenge is that I really like the time component to a lot of these challenges, because that puts a lot of perspective on. And it doesn't mean you stop at the week or the month time. It's you have a checkpoint and you reevaluate. Like, what have you learned? Is it still on track? Is there other higher priority customer needs? Like, are you working on something that it's now turning out to be a really difficult problem to solve, and maybe there are some bigger wins that we can take more immediately, right? Like, and it also depends on the organization. Some organizations will be completely happy to have 5 PhDs in a room for 2 years developing the next DeepMind or something, right? And that's totally cool. But for smaller orgs, you can't do that, right? You can't.
Well, so that's one direction of fundamentally. The other direction is you have an example of when you had a group come up with a completely new product from what you set them in some direction researching, they come up with something that you weren't expecting that's a completely new product.
Yes.
That's fundamentally new. That doesn't involve PhD sitting in a room for
That's right.
5 years, right? So what happened in those types of situations? What was it that
was so
you saw? Like,
fundamental?
was there, because they come up with something that you wouldn't expect them to come up with. So my question is, what pieces of this worked well to get to those types of things, and how did you increase the chance of coming up with that new product or that new thing?
So that definitely comes. So I definitely had that experience. Was completely new, and that's a lot of it was like what I alluded, because you didn't define the problem for the engineer. You said this is there's a customer need. They need to do something. Maybe the customer doesn't really understand what they need, but you then might have interviews with the customer. What is it really that is your problem that you're trying to solve? So through that and allowing that exploration of the problem, you might end up finding, oh, there might be a completely different way somebody hasn't thought about that you can apply. There's a million PhDs currently working on a million problems. Even if like 1% of them publishes and puts up code, that's still a lot of various solutions. So by doing a literature survey for like a few weeks, you might have a really good idea of, once you understand the problem, if there's another solution out there that you might be able to transform into that to solve that problem. So that's the thing that when you're saying I like this completely different way of thinking, that's where those things came from.
That was an unusual solution to the problem that you expected. One other way of viewing it is, did they come up with a new direction by going in the way that you told them, by heading in the direction you told them? Did they come up with something that was a completely new direction rather than a new way of doing that direction?
Yes.
So how did that come about? Was it the type of people? Was it the process? Was it what made that work?
I believe it was people and not constraining the problem. Like, I think that's leaving the open as an open problem, right? Like.
Okay. Well, so what were the type of people? What were they like that came up with those types of problems? Or was it purely just, like as you said, the way that you set up the problem, or their goal, the way that you set up their instructions on how to proceed?
So, I don't have that many great new experience ideas. A lot of the stuff that I've done was basically leveraging something that somebody else has done somewhere else. There's a lot of greenfield things that are in data science, but there were a couple of solutions that we came up with that were just basically, we didn't know how to solve it. We knew what the customer need was after several interviews. And then we sat around and brainstormed on ideas, and we had a consultant that was also a professor that helped us with some of these ideas. So it's through brainstorming we came up with let's try this combination of things. It's a new thing, right? I don't know if that answers.
In one of the companies I worked for in the past, we kind of addressed that. This was the mid-90s when the internet was still kind of virgin territory. We'd have a pitch meeting every month where anyone from the chief scientist to a junior developer could basically pitch a research topic. And so it could be, you know, blue sky, it could be, I want to look at this because I think it's something cool that might be useful, to, you know, a risk mitigation experiment or prototype, to an elaboration on a product. And so it's kind of almost like, you know, what you've heard in the entertainment industry where, you know, like Pixar, where everyone gets to pitch, you know, what might become Toy Story or Incredibles or whatever. And it worked fairly well for us. The key being that the senior management and development understood that continuum. And so, you know, if it was an experiment or, you know, fairly blue sky research, we set the expectations with the rest of the company that we weren't making a product. Whereas if we were elaborating on something, you know, in other words, it was research that was going to go fairly directly in product development, then there were different expectations. Because what I have seen in places where it hasn't worked is where you either show, you know, the salespeople or the business units your prototypes, and you don't set the expectations that a prototype's not a product. Because if you've done a good prototype, it's not a product. You didn't create enough unit tests to make sure this thing is maintainable. You haven't done the documentation that a customer needs. You haven't done a whole bunch of things that makes it a product. Because that was too much investment when it was speculative work. A good prototype does just enough to answer the question you need. Then you need to, you know, spin it off into a product. And that's where my experience has been, is the companies that do really well have a good process for spinning off from the research team into a product development team. And that may mean some of the research team goes into developing that product, or you've got a good transition team that leaves the research team alone. But throwing it over the wall is just a recipe for disaster.
Of course, totally agree. There's a lot of overlap with that and the FedEx days and the hackathons that we run, because while we define, we don't, we leave the problems very open-ended for these pitch ideas. But a lot of people are so engaged in the company, they want to do well in the company, they just naturally just work on ideas that are relevant to the business. So you might end up at the end, it's really amazing how many great ideas after just 24 hours. And a lot of them are actual, like, you know, demoable things you can have. And sometimes it's just a learning or a dead end, but a lot of them are, like you say, these really neat ideas or improvements that are, you know, sometimes can go into a roadmap.
So managing these research and development teams, obviously, you've got, you know, people to go off and do work, and you're trying to time box it. You've got given a whole bunch of ideas as to how to guide this, feed it, promote its success. What does it actually look like in the organization where you've seen it work well? Like, what does it look like daily, weekly, or monthly? How does the business bound this, or how does it just let it go? Like, what do you see?
Well,
do they run an agile process?
So it's an agile process. Mechanisms? So we use agile process, and you would have, like, you have a roadmap meeting for product. You could have a roadmap meeting for what are the research ideas that you would like to work on, and you might decide, well, these things are really not that interesting or they're not needed, and some are. Some could be done on product team. They may not actually be using the data scientists well. So you might want to think about having a roadmap of these, keep track of all these cool ideas. And what I found useful was also keep track of all these explorations and dead ends, because you'd be surprised how many times every year somebody comes up with this great idea and it's like, yeah, but we tried it a year ago and it was a no-go, right, for X, Y, Z. So having that, keeping that history is really beneficial.
So what's the right level of oversight without being in the way? Like what work in terms of enabling the team to go and spend X amount of money, time, resources, versus preventing them from running amok?
Well, that all depends on the organization, and you never want to run them amok.
Right. So I'm trying to figure out what worked for you guys.
So for our teams, for our company right now, we're about four people that are doing a lot of this research stuff. But for our size company with around 200 employees, that seems like a reasonable amount. You could definitely, I prefer more.
But do they give you like 6 months come back, or do they give you like a weekly check-in on how things are going, or what the next deliverable is? Like, how do you?
So it depends. Like, you go through phases. So in my team, I actually go through phases. So right now we're in a phase where we're in productizing. So everything is like you go weekly by weekly, release to release. We need to develop these features, and we're working with the product team. Year before, we were working on prototyping. So I would be, talking to the executive, the CTO, and the director of forensics, for example, and seeking what are the ideas, what is the, if we were to invest, like what is the key customer problem you guys want us to investigate, list them, prioritize them, and go after those. So. That answer? There's no perfect. I don't think there's an ideal. Like how much can you? The more your company can afford to spend on these things, the benefit is not really apparent immediately. That's the thing, right? A lot of these things are you're building an innovative, creative core that will pay back maybe 2 years down the road, right? So being mindful of that, it's really difficult. I don't know. I don't have an answer. Maybe somebody in the room has an answer to this. But I haven't found a way to quantify that to my boss, saying, because we invested in 5 people a year ago, this is how much revenue I have right now from us. It's really difficult, and maybe there's an answer there.
Have you had an experience where, because of the research that's underway, you've discovered something that's immediately useful? Like, you just uncovered something that you could take it to your customers in a month.
Yeah, sometimes you have that. Yeah, you might have that. Yeah, I could see that. I think there's one instance, like in recent history, that I've had something like that happen, where it was just, oh, I heard about this problem, and like, oh yeah, but we can solve it as well.
Okay.
So, yeah, that totally happens. Yeah.
I was curious about what percentage of your R&D group or your development group is assigned to these types of groups. So what's the breakdown of either cost or people?
I don't know how much. It's a private company, so I don't know how much I can talk about.
Or what even you want to recommend? What like should you be spending 10% of the resources on these research exploring, or should you be spending 30? I mean, I don't know what the number should be.
Honestly, I don't think there is a one number. I don't think there's a number. It's very much like what is your organization like? What is it willing to put aside? What are the financial constraints of that organization? Is it self-funded through revenue, or is it investor-based? Like, there's so many variables. Like, it's really difficult to say. I don't think there's a magic number. I think it's definitely much smaller than the whole R&D size.
Can you bound it? It should be more than 5% and less than 30%, or is there some?
Doesn't that depend?
I don't think you can bound it.
Sorry, let me.
Or the type of, or like even for the type of institution, like if you're a large corporation, it should be in this range. If you're a small corporation, who knows what it could be? It could be any, like it could be the whole group. But is there some way of bounding it?
I would actually propose it's product based, and take a company, a telco like Bell or Rogers or whoever. If you're talking SMS texting, they're in a place like there is no innovation left in SMS. I might be wrong, but I'm not an SMS person, right? But there's no innovation left there, so you want to stabilize that, and you just want to milk it for all its money with the least amount of cost, right?
Right. So a large group or a stable product is going to be very low,
but take
how do you measure it? How do you get an idea of what it should be?
I think it depends. Like if you're talking something more leading edge, like IoT or
well, certainly a startup, almost everybody is what he's describing, right?
Yeah.
So, but is there some way of getting an idea of what it should be?
I think it depends. I think it's a tough one, or
yeah,
experience based.
It's very difficult to tell. Like there might be some really, how you structure your teams. Maybe a lot of your product teams are executing almost like research teams. Like it's so dependent on the teams, the problems, like the problem space too. Like if you are literally making buttons, there might not be a lot of need for data scientists. But if you are Google and have massive amounts of data, there's so many things you can do, right? Like you're constrained by your the problems, the data.
Okay,
right?
so can I ask it from the other way around? Does the percent that you spend on these types of groups indicate something about what your product is actually doing, or what your company is, what the state of your current company is? Is this a way of judging what type of, like, if you're in this range, you're not a growth company, you're a rent-seeking company, right? And if you're in this level, then you're a startup. Even if you're like thousands of people, if you're doing this type of thing, you're a startup. Like, is there some way of the other way around of it determining what your priorities are, or what your? So
as you know, there's definitely a correlation between if you have a lot of these research ideas, you'll be able to more likely generate more revenue longer term, and you'll innovate more and be able to address challenges as they're happening better than if you don't. So I think there's definitely a direct correlation. I think there's I don't know. I wouldn't feel comfortable saying this is how much percentage you should have, because I don't think it depends on so many things. The more, obviously, the better, I think, because there is a correlation. Like if you invest in leading research and you set aside some budget to do this work, you'll have a creative, and you build this creative team, you will come up, I can guarantee you'll come up with some really creative solutions that you may not have asked, even for problems you may not have asked. So, yeah.
It's well past 6:30, so I think we'll probably want to be getting home. So thank you very much. There's some tough questions there.
No problem. Hopefully it made sense.
Questions generate questions.
Yeah, it was a good topic, and we really appreciate you coming in tonight. So
thank you. Thanks.
We're looking for speakers for future events, so if any of you have something you're passionate about and you want to share, let me know. Or even if you have maybe someone at your company did a lunch and learn and they'd be able to adapt it or bring it in here for this group, they've already got it set up. You can either talk to me directly or just message us on the meetup. We're also really trying to increase the number of women presenters, because since Lisa and I took over, I don't think we've had any women presenters. So maybe we can get that up a little bit. I know Lisa and I are both planning to present this year, so that'll at least help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Then we need to start separating backwards compatible, backwards incompatible.